Hello everyone. I will share real stories that I know and I'm sure you will like them.
It was just another quiet afternoon, the house empty except for me. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the living room windows, casting warm golden hues over the hardwood floor. I had just finished my workout, my body warm from exertion, muscles slightly aching in that satisfying way. I rolled out my yoga mat, deciding to stretch for a bit before heading to the shower. The room was silent except for the soft instrumental music playing from my phone, a relaxing melody that filled the space. I exhaled slowly, lowering myself into a deep stretch, feeling the tension release from my body. The long day had left me drained, and this was my time to unwind, to ease into the quietness of the house, my own little escape. My back was arched, my arms reaching forward, stretching every inch of my body when I heard it, the faint sound of a door opening. I froze for half a second, my pulse quickening before I forced myself to relax. It was probably just my husband, home earlier than expected. But then I heard a different voice. Didn't mean to interrupt. The voice was familiar, deep, casual, but edged with something unreadable. My breath caught slightly as I turned my head just enough to see him, Nick, my husband's best friend, standing in the doorway. His presence was unexpected, and for a moment, I wasn't sure how to react. He looked almost amused, his hands casually tucked into his pockets, though there was something else in his expression, something lingering beneath the surface. I swallowed, straightening up slowly, brushing my hair away from my face. "Hey, Nick." I wasn't expecting anyone. He gave a small smirk, stepping further into the room. "Yeah, your husband told me to swing by, but I didn't think I'd be walking in on a whole performance." I let out a soft laugh, though my stomach tensed slightly at his words. "It's just stretching." Looked pretty intense from where I was standing. I shook my head, standing up fully now, suddenly hyper-aware of the way my tank top clung to my skin, the faint sheen of sweat still lingering from my workout. "Did you need something?" Nick leaned against the doorframe, his eyes steady on mine. "Just dropping something off for your husband." But now I think I walked in at the right time. A beat of silence passed between us, the air shifting slightly. The room suddenly felt warmer, the space between us too small. I cleared my throat, reaching for my water bottle. "Well, thanks for stopping by." I was just about to. "You should finish your stretching," he interrupted, his voice lower now, more serious. "Don't let me stop you." I hesitated. His gaze didn't waver, and for a second, I wondered if I had imagined the flicker of something else in his expression. Something that sent a quiet shiver through me. I knew I should brush it off. Act normal. Pretend this was just like any other visit. But something about the way he was looking at me made it impossible to move. I lowered myself back onto the mat, my heart pounding a little harder than before. As I stretched forward, feeling the tightness in my muscles, I was acutely aware of his presence, of the way his gaze lingered. The soft sounds of my breathing mixed with the distant hum of music, creating an atmosphere that felt heavier than before. "You're really into this, huh?" Nick's voice broke the silence. I glanced up at him, my body still folded into the stretch. "It helps me relax." His smirk deepened slightly. "Yeah? You looked pretty lost in it when I walked in." I sat up slowly, rolling my shoulders. "It's just routine." Nick nodded, but something about his expression told me he didn't entirely believe me. He stepped a little closer, and I felt my pulse quicken. "I can see why. You look focused." The air between us felt electric, and I wasn't sure if it was because of my own imagination or something real. Either way, I knew I needed to be careful. This was Nick, my husband's best friend. And yet, as he stood there, watching me, I couldn't ignore the way my skin tingled under his gaze. I swallowed hard, standing up, brushing off the tension. "I should shower." Nick's smirk remained, but he nodded. "Yeah, wouldn't want you to cool down too fast." His words lingered, thick with something unspoken. And as I walked past him, my heart beat just a little too fast, I knew. This wasn't just a normal visit anymore. I closed the bathroom door behind me, my pulse still unsteady. The warmth of the room, the faint scent of eucalyptus from my body wash, it should have been comforting, grounding. But my mind was elsewhere, stuck on the way Nick had looked at me, on the way the air had shifted when he stepped just a little too close. I turned on the shower, letting the steam rise around me as I stepped under the hot water, hoping it would wash away the tension still lingering on my skin. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That a line had been drawn, so faint it was almost invisible, but there nonetheless. As I wrapped myself in a towel and stepped out of the shower, I heard something. A faint knock on the door. My breath hitched. "Everything okay?" Nick's voice, just outside. Calm. Too calm. I hesitated for a second before clearing my throat. "Yeah, just finishing up." Silence. But I knew he was still there. I gripped the towel a little tighter. "Did you need something?" A pause, then, "No. Just checking." I should have been relieved when I heard his footsteps retreat down the hall. But instead, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, my body still humming with something I didn't want to name. By the time I made it back downstairs, Nick was still there. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone like he had all the time in the world. The tension from earlier had settled into something quieter now, something unspoken but very much present. He looked up as I entered, his gaze flickering over me briefly before he smirked. "Thought you got lost up there." I rolled my eyes, forcing a laugh as I walked to the fridge, needing something, anything, to keep my hands busy. Just took my time. "Yeah," I noticed. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. I grabbed a bottle of water, twisting the cap off a little too forcefully before taking a sip, trying to ignore the way his presence made my skin feel too warm. "So," I said, trying to sound casual, "did you need me to tell my husband you stopped by?" Nick shrugged, pushing away from the counter. "I already texted him. He said he'll be back late." My fingers tightened around the bottle. "Right." Another pause, longer this time. He took a slow step closer, and I held my ground, refusing to acknowledge the way my pulse quickened. "You seem nervous," he said, tilting his head slightly, studying me. "Why's that?" I forced out a breathy laugh. "I'm not." He smirked, not believing me. "If you say so." The air between us was thick, charged with something I didn't want to name. My mind screamed for me to walk away, to end this, to remind myself that this was Nick, my husband's best friend. But my body was betraying me, locked in place, waiting. Nick exhaled, running a hand through his hair before stepping back. "I should go." The words were simple, but the hesitation in them wasn't. I nodded, relieved and disappointed all at once. "Yeah, probably a good idea." He lingered for just a second longer, his eyes meeting mine, something unsaid hanging between us like a thread stretched too tight. Then, finally, he turned and walked to the door. The sound of it closing behind him echoed through the quiet house, leaving me standing there, gripping my water bottle, my heart still racing. Nothing had happened. And yet, everything felt different. As I exhaled, leaning back against the counter, I realized one thing with certainty. This wasn't over.